but that's a good question. Obviously, I mean, that brings it up right away. We know the success rate, but obviously when things are going well, people aren't reaching out to you. So you're coming in sometimes under not the easiest of circumstances. I mean, Chateau Elan, beautiful place, beautiful facility outside of the realm of Alta. And same with Rome. That certainly hurts in Atlanta. So how do you guys, how do you position yourselves? What do you try to do differently and I know Rome is a different beast than Chateau Elan. So let's start with Chateau Elan because that's more of obviously that's a resort to me. That's, I always felt like, why aren't they doing more weekend getaway type things?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think it's sort of changed over the years. I'd say early on in the early years, it was normally you got the call not after the banner year. It was normally there was an issue, there was a change needed to be made or a direction change, and that's where you were brought in. So I think that was a lot of the early routes for us as we picked up a lot of contracts. But then as years have gone on and we've gotten bigger with more resources and more support, sometimes it's coming into a good operation and then enhancing what's already there, taking what's already good and then just putting, for lack of better words, putting it on steroids, putting more people around it, more resources, connecting it to more other properties. So there's an enhanced value proposition for the membership because by being a member here, you now have access to these clubs and these resorts in different parts of the country as well. Chateau Elan initially started because it's a Troon managed club on the Gulf side. So that's how the introduction came through the engagement there. But yes, I mean, not much had happened in years. They put a bunch of money into the property. So we actually do a lot of camp business there. That's the majority of the business at Chateau Elan. We have tennis and wine weekends, pickleball and wine weekends. We're going through a resurface project right now. So that'll sort of turn into some more beefing up of the membership and local offerings. But you're right, it's a little outside of the immediate scope of what is known as the juggernaut of Atlanta tennis.
Mm-hmm. So, and I guess we make an assumption, Sean, because we're in the business. We know who Scott is and who he works for. But should we start there? What is Cliff Drysdale and Peter Burwash International? What is your mission statement? What do you provide to, what is your service?
Sure. So you want me to just share my name and a little bit of myself?
Yeah, well, just this way everybody knows you. And then, like I said, I apologize. We jumped in assuming everybody knows you like we know you, and we can't do that.
Sure. My name's Scott McCulloch. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of Cliff Drysdale Management. And Cliff Drysdale Management has sort of grown over the years. Cliff Drysdale Tennis was purchased by Troon, who's the largest golf management company in the world, about 5 years ago, coming up in a couple of weeks from now. And then in December of 2021, Troon then also acquired PBI, which is known as Peter Burwash International. So Troon purchased over the last 5 years the two largest tennis management companies in the world. So that's all now, both brands are serviced under our Cliff Drysdale headquarters, and we support both those brands, also white label brands and also Troon clubs within all the scope of racket sports, from private clubs, city contracts, resorts, seasonal clubs, and we service 63 clubs over 13 countries throughout the globe. And they all look of different shapes and sizes. Some are one-man operations, some are, large operations with tennis, front desk, maintenance, membership, all facets of operations. So whatever is within the club management world, we really dive into that. And then in addition, we have a travel business, which does signature events and camp events to all of our resorts throughout the globe as well, more so domestically and sort of expanding more into the international scope as well. So we sort of live all in that. Our roots were tennis for many, many years, which is indicated in our name still, Cliff Drysdale Tennis and PBI International Tennis Specialist, but we've definitely ventured into racket sports as well and support where I am right now at Key Biscayne. We have a large padel operation and then also a lot of pickleball that's morphed into a lot of our other properties as well. So we definitely live in racket sports, but our heart has always been, in the tennis world.
I think we're all going through that. But pickleball is such a great opportunity, and in Florida, padel as well. I mean, so there's, and especially in Atlanta, and this, again, we ask, we love to hear your insight because we always feel Atlanta is so different. That Atlanta, unfortunately, for those involved in the industry, it has been historically more an amenity. It's cheap, because most of these neighborhoods culturally, because of Alta, have been built with tennis courts, lights, and a lot of things that are clubs, other places, are neighborhoods here. So much is taken for granted. So Atlanta is always a bit of a challenge. Curiosity now, Troon, you guys were more of a management. Troon owns some of these facilities as well. So you're kind of going into the same space as Invited, formerly Club Corp.
Sure. No, Troon is third-party management as well.
Management as well.
Of the 750 plus properties they oversee, they probably have ownership in 2 to 3 of them.
Gotcha.
So it's primarily third-party management.
So they're staying out of the real estate game. Probably good for them.
Yeah. A little less complex.
Yes, exactly. Very good. So that certainly helps, I think, everybody, because it's fascinating. Obviously, I had a friend partner starting off who was a PBI alumni and was out in Hawaii and got we started the idea of management company 20 some odd years ago, and always laughed. Scalability so difficult because either tennis, especially in Atlanta, there's no overhead, so your majority of your revenue is being paid out. It's labor intensive. So I loved what you said earlier about we take our margins, and through obviously size we can grow our margins that way, because it's a tough business. I mean, you guys do it very well, and I come from but it's a tough business. It's not easy.
It's a grueling business, and it's always, particularly in the early years, there's a challenge with scale, because as you take on more properties, then not all properties are where their potential are. They may be starting out, and there's a slow turn to get a club really under the rails. But then to add value to that, you've got to have experts and support staff that support those teams, and that's sort of then a balance of how many. Where's the horse before the cart before the horse? Because do you get the support staff to then go out and get clubs, or as you get clubs, how do you then scale up the support as well? And there's razor thin margins in it, because like you said, everything is really within the revenue that you can charge for tennis, and then you've got all the costs and the payroll and the overhead and the business operations. That it's a very thin margin business that you've got to be very on point and very detailed and accurate. You can't take too many swings without some good thought process behind it, and sort of how you're going to approach it and how you approach scaling, because you've got to do it within the right step. Because if you're not taking care of home base where you are, then you can't go out and get 5 or 10 more, because those are going to collapse on you. So you've always got to have an eye for growing, but also growing the sustainability of what you've got as well, and making sure there's quality in that.
Well, within a business, you want to grow, but at a club, like at a single club, if we're going to talk Chateau Elan, or Atlanta specific Chateau Elan or Standard Club, they don't care about you growing. They don't want you to. They don't actually want you to grow. They want everybody else to go away, and they only care about themselves. And what are you going to do for my club? So how do you, from your position, it's kind of a tied-in question of kind of improving tennis in general in Atlanta. So you're this big conglomerate that comes down to help manage a facility, rather than a Bobby Schindler type who runs his facility and doesn't have all the other clubs to worry about.
Sure.
He can focus on his one club. How do you still have that personal touch, that not getting too big to care about a Chateau Elan or Standard Club specifically?
Sure. I think there's pieces in that. I mean, there's always the perception that you're this big corporate office. We actually call our office HQ, because we feel like it's more relatable to be headquarters rather than corporate. And we just try to break down stereotypes. I turn up to work every day in tennis clothes. So, we're at the root of it all. We're guys and girls that we have a company because we take a tennis court every day. I think one of the big goals that we aim at when we approach a property or engage with a property is, what are the goals of ownership, and what does success look like for them? And that may look like engagement, growing a program, events, membership, experience, value proposition of getting access to other properties. So I think you've got to define that, because you're right. If you come in with your goals that may not match up with their goals, that creates friction because it looks like the business within the business. So seemingly with our team, as we engage, we try to really get on that same page. So we define success early on, and then we really leave it up to the club as well. We have no ego where the brand sits. They can put it out in front, they can co-brand it, or they can white label it and we be the engine under the hood and it all be about the club brand. So I think when you establish that early on, then you can work out the landscape of how you're going to operate it and see if there's going to be success there. If there's not going to be a number that works for everyone, then that's a pretty easy piece to sort of, revisit the conversation later on. But if you can achieve what they want, and then also I think a lot of clubs as well, they don't understand the opportunity of the value of what you can add. And especially racket sports right now, I mean, the pickleball numbers are all over the place, so we won't get into that. I mean, how they're evaluating how many people there are. But if you put pickleball and tennis, there's 40 million players roughly. That's going to continue to year over year grow. Golf's at about 25 million. So I think more clubs are realizing that racket sports is going to be a lot of the sustainability of their membership. So a lot of their focus has got to turn to retention, experience, and value add, and how you put more on there. So I think to your question there as well with Bobby, he could have an amazing operation. I'm sure it's first class in every sense, and nothing changes there. But then whatever you can bolt on to the side of that, of adding additional pieces, not changing. I think that's the perception that a lot of people have, that we come in and we change a lot. In some instances, yes, because it just needs to be changed flat out. But in a lot, there's a lot of good stuff there. So how do you bolt onto that and put more experiences, access to other clubs, other amenities, and then also say, hey, Bobby, you do amazing, but let us give you some more time to focus on what you do really great and put some other experts around you, because you've got the ability to do this, but you don't have to do this. Let's have some other people support that value prop as well. And then the experience starts to lift with what they can do, because I think a lot of directors are put in tough positions. They've got great skill sets, but they're asked to do too many things. So they can only do things to a certain level. They can't really knock things out of the park, because you get pulled between on court, off court, and time.
It's interesting because Bobby, you said the same thing to me yesterday. So I think this is one of the values that they bring, is what Bobby and I are doing on a more local scale, which is he's got his club and his expertise. I've got an expertise, and they fit together. Can we figure out how to add something into his club to bring value, that value add-on kind of thing? And it's interesting in such a low margin business, as Bobby calls it, labor intensive. It's just got to be tough to come in and be able to help and say, okay, we really are, whether you're turning a club around, you come in because things aren't great and you really do need to help with maybe a culture change or not. But if you've got those extra expertises, what's plural of expertise? those extra expertise that you can help us with. That's really a cool way to be able to come in and, like you said, not completely flip everything on its head, but really give it an extra boost.
Exactly. And I think that's a goal, because and I think a lot of the time clubs don't also necessarily understand how to structure their rackets departments, and they just go off a budget from the year before, rather than looking at the engagement of, if participation's growing, we're keeping more members, or if residents are engaging at the amenity center, there's more people playing. That's how we help them sort of justify where they may establish their budget, not just for us, but for keeping quality people and quality staff, so that you've got the right staffing model to service the community. Quick example I'd give is, I just recently spent some time with a club that's a 1,000 home community, and right now they've got 53% of their their community touch racket sports on a monthly basis. but yet racket sports make 2% of their operating budget for their amenity package. So looking at it, adding more pickleball courts and tennis courts now, it's helping them with the staffing model that you need more leadership, which will increase the budget, but you're now going to service 75% of your community for 4% of your total operating budget. So don't just look at the year-over-year numbers, sort of helping understand how to put success in there, because now their team is going to be able to achieve more success for the community that they serve. So it's sort of putting the round peg in the round hole, not the round peg in the square hole. And I think that's a lot of the value that we bring, not just necessarily to the pros, but also to clubs, and understanding how they navigate this landscape going forward. Because if you put those economics of 4% to service 75% of your population, I think most people would take those every day of the week.
And I love the fact your background is all encompassing. You know, you started pumping ball. You started as a player pumping balls, then you went into the operationals, and you know everything you said. I sit there and go, obviously, having some familiarity with PBI and Cliff Drysdale doing it just as long, just as well. So much of it is we like tennis. We know our foundation. This is what we're good at. So now we take what we're good at into a situation. And I love Atlanta. My gosh, you got 3 facilities that are completely different. So you're wearing 3 different hats. You got Rome that is, you know, tournament driven, juniors. You got Chateau Elan that is you know, a community, but very high end community, more of a resort. And you have Standard Club that historically has been a private club. So I mean, just here in Atlanta, you have 3 different hats you're wearing.
Exactly. I think that's the fun part. And that's where we cover the scope of it all. We don't have someone that is the subject matter expert on everything. We have all throughout our company, throughout our network, we've got all these great people that we've got the subject matter experts on different pieces of. So every club gets a senior director within our scope. And so Chateau Elan has a senior director that is like a regional director for the director that's in place there. And he runs one of the biggest operations at Amelia Island, which is a big resort community as well.
Right,
and then likewise, we have someone for Chateau Elan. So the person that supports Hannah at Chateau Elan is very skilled in the membership world. And then same thing, I'm very engaged with the city of Rome. That's got a different set of economics to it, because the city of Rome built this beautiful facility and also the downtown facility to be an economic driver. So It's driving tournaments and events. So you start to put this whole community together. And I think that's what has sort of made the versatility for us over the years, that whatever the landscape someone in tennis or racket sports is in, we've got it covered, not from one person, but from a multiple of people that have multiple different skill sets. And you can tap into this network at any time. And I think that's one of the things that we foster within our culture. We connect our directors on a weekly basis. They're sent out a coffee chat. So you get paired up each week with a different director at a different club, maybe in Dubai, maybe in Nevis, maybe in California or Atlanta. And they sort of chat about what the challenges are, what's coming up, and where they're having success. And they've got that whole network to just pick the brain on and see how they can succeed.
That's awesome. I mean, not that we want anything to do with what you're doing, but we feel that, and you know, we have obviously more teaching pros than most cities, just because of the sheer abundance of, which is good and bad. You have a lot of guys who, you know, have a hopper in their trunk, and okay, now I'm a teaching professional, and we're trying really hard to show the value of why you want a certified professional, why you know, the fact that we have to take continuing education, we have to stay engaged in it and try to change that perception. I always used to laugh and tell the story. The only reason people knew I was certified is that once a year, the GPTA would take out an ad in Net News, the Alta magazine, saying, celebrating our certified professionals. And they'd be like, oh, you're certified? Yeah. What does that mean? And I always felt that golf does a much better job with the PGA card than tennis does with the USPTA or USPTR certification. It just doesn't hold that same couple. And even what you go through, and I love what you're saying as far as it's great to be able to speak to different people. Everything you said, I'm laughing because I've experienced it. Like you said, you hire somebody good for a community. Well, then the community says, do I really need the management company? I can hire this person. And, we had a development here in Atlanta, St. Marlowe. We put the girl in, they loved the girl, they hired the girl. So essentially getting rid of us. Then, one of the guys called and said, well, she's not putting on the parties that you used to put on. I'm like, well, you dismissed us. She's one person. We were a company that was able to help her with the things that, because now you got one person trying to do the role of three. And well, that's what happens, and again, especially in Atlanta, unfortunately, because they have a little bit of a playing background, they think they have more knowledge, and it makes it tough. And you don't want to hear one person. It's great to be able to talk to Scott, even though Scott can do everything for you. Scott's going to do what Scott does, and then he's going to hand it off. And I think that creates a comfort level for people.
Absolutely. I think there's whenever you have that person engage with others around them, they're continually in more of a growth mindset, because then they've got others to pull on and others to support them. And I think you always look at it as cost versus value. So if we can continue to bring more value, the cost will justify whatever I pay for my phone a month. I'll continue to pay because the value it brings to my life is higher. I don't want to go to a flip phone for $50 a month. So, and I think that way in racket sports, too many times we try to take the cost out of it rather than just adding more value. And if you've got someone there like the individual you're speaking about, she's got more support, more resources. She can bring more value to the community. She's the captain of the ship, but the captain of the ship has to have the engine behind it. Absolutely. And the person constantly putting the fuel into it and bringing different ideas and different thoughts and what's happening, because otherwise they get very rooted into their community. It could be, in that community could be the club. They're not hearing everything that's outside or exposed to everything that's outside. And that's also an education piece with pros as well, so that they're thinking as well, not just I could do this by myself, or you could do a portion of this, but then you're going to continue to get to a spot where you're operating, not where you're growing and operating. And you're not going to be able to attract people in. And then when you get a pro, you're not going to have the time to really develop them and give them the tools so they can be successful, or very few can. And so I think it's sort of painting that bigger landscape for everyone of how that all works.
Well, and I love what you're saying, because it's so much fun. You laugh on that side of it, as you described. You hire somebody that can work 40 hours a week on the court. Well, that's what they're good at, but they're not good at growing a program. There's still one pro there. If there's, that's not what their strength is. I loved what you said about the clubs. I was at a country club that now is managed and was bought by Invited, and I'd sit there and say the same thing. I'm like, look at my people. If you look at the numbers, 60% of my people have a direct correlation to the amenities process. Your golfers, 20% of the membership pay 80% of the rounds. Yet, as you said, the money is going to golf. You're making more people, or more people are participating on the tennis. And I fought it. Look, we have more room for more courts. No, we don't need any more courts. Well, Club Corp came in, they built more courts. And so I'm gone now, but I look like a genius, but it's funny. It's tough. And as you said, you're not just dealing it from the standpoint of you got to get the business, which is one sell. Then you got to convince the pro, or the person you put in, you're now part of a team. We're not going to do it this way. It's a challenging business. And as we said, it's fun in Atlanta. We always laugh. You never want to be the first one out of the catastrophe. As I said, something happened at all these clubs that they finally say, or it's been a process where they finally realize through education and time, we don't really know what we're doing. Let's call Peter Burwash and let's call Cliff Drysdale, because they know what they're doing. And, that's a good thing, too, because it's almost like surrender. So they're coming to you saying, OK, we need to hear outside ideas. So that probably is your only saving grace in a lot of these circumstances, is that they're admitting defeat, at least in some capacity.
I think in some instances, yes, but then in some, they're now going, we believe there's more that we can get out of the tank. But we like a professional, but they don't have that ability to take it to another level. What are our options as well? Particularly, I think in this landscape, as I think it's a good thing. I've never been on as many calls as I have in the last year about clubs looking to add courts to their footprint, because they're actually seeing that in 3-4 years from now, there's going to be like 80 million racket sports players. That's like 1 out of every 4 or 5 people in America touching racket sports. So clubs are starting to wise up to, we've got to put more racket sports in here, because that's going to be a bulk of our membership, and where it sits on the survey every year is now going to, it's starting to sit a lot higher as well.
And that's going to change the incremental revenue producers as well. That's going to give different point of purchase, which you hate to say, a country club is more driven by point of purchase because all the members know when the sales come. So they're not buying every day. They're waiting for Christmas. You're getting your point of purchase. And if you do an outing, well, if I go to Chateau Elan, obviously I want something that says Chateau Elan on it. So I'm more apt to buy a shirt as a visitor than the member. So all the things you got to deal with. And I love, we laugh though. The only thing we got to worry about with the racket sports growth is it seems like hospitals are getting a big boom as well from the pickleball participation, that we're $500 million into healthcare costs in the last year because of emergency room visits. So that'll be a whole different diet. We'll all have hospital rooms, part of our program. Well, we got a doctor right here. Come on in. So, but
they might start building pickleball courts next to ERs. So
make it convenient for you.
Yeah, putting in the parking lot.
I absolutely agree. That makes it a little bit easier. Fascinating. Good stuff. Good stuff. Sean, I don't want to monopolize this. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to focus on figuring out, again, from Scott while we've got him, and we won't take up too much of your time, Scott, because I look at it's 63 clubs in, what'd you say, 13 countries? So you probably got a few things to do today. And
plenty of time.
That's good to hear. That means things are going well, right?
Well, we'll be back too, Scott. We'll bother you again. Don't worry.
Good. Anytime.
We can be tenacious. But from a culture point of view, you talk about coming in and helping a club and either being the support structure or the brand out front. If you need a under new management sign, like that's usually there for a reason, to let people know, hey, by the way, we got rid of the guy you didn't like, that kind of thing. Or being the more under the hood, as you say, the engine type. Is that cultural within Cliff Drysdale? Is that your culture? Is that how it's always been? How do you guys make that part of the deal?
Sure. I think that's always been the DNA. I mean, where I am today is the Ritz-Carlton in Key Biscayne. This was our #1 club, and that was sort of the growth of Cliff Drysdale. Cliff and his partner, Don Henderson, they started here, and then the city of Weston, which I'm based at a lot as well, was our second club. The city manager called and said, hey, we need some help. We're building this new tennis center. Some of it comes from new builds. So we come in early and we help with the design process and laying it out correctly, because what we did here is we built a club that's got the clubhouse in the center and all the courts around. Too many times they build facilities where clubhouse is here and then the courts go all the way out the back, and so it's got a terrible environment. So we helped them with this, and then we helped them with the city of Weston, and then that was just part of the DNA. It's sort of going in to see how we can help and assist. I think the misconception about both PBI and CDT is that they're the four-headed monster coming to clear everyone out and move everyone around. I think it's sort of couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, there is a lot of instances where we come in and our goal is we try to work with what's there, providing the team that are there have got a mindset that is in line with winning for everyone, winning for the club, winning for the members, winning for themselves. Unfortunately, there's not always that mindset. So that's where it does create separation. So you need to realign what success and what the goals are. So that's been our approach all the time. We've tried not to toot our horn too much and say it's all about us. Really, it's more about the club and the brand of the club and what the club is doing and what the resort is doing. But however, we can leverage our brand to an audience that we have to attract people. So if it's a resort, when I started at Amelia Island before Scott came in, there really wasn't much coming in. Now we're the largest wholesaler for room nights for Amelia Island. So we drive a lot of business through our camps there. So I think that same thing with Chateau Elan. I mean, we're not the largest wholesaler there, but we bring a lot of room nights in, but it's really putting what can we do with our brand name, but try to be very respectful to the property and have it be about the community and the property and not about us. And put the appropriate branding where it needs to be. And that's always just been our DNA. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're all in hospitality. So you've got to have a service heart. And if you have a service heart and you come at everything from how do you serve others, you tend to figure a lot of things out and come at it with the right approach rather than how do we take care of us as we come into a relationship. Because at the end of the day, we aim at everything to be a long-term relationship, not a short-term one. So you've got to come with how do they get the 51% win and you get 49, not the other way around, because that's probably going to grow and you'll find common alignment and ways that you can partner long-term, which has been what led to most of our growth. It all came from organic referrals from, someone was happy with what we were doing. So they told a friend as they heard about a club was there, or GM moved from one hotel to another. So when he got there and he had tennis, he was like, I had a great experience here. I want to bring these guys in here. And while GM's talking within private club world or, the resort world.
Well, it's little things. Again, what you said, it makes me laugh. I mean, again, we all talk about it and I'll say it out loud. Just the positioning of the courts, creating that heart. We have a tournament here in Atlanta that we always laugh about, and not to poo-poo. It's a tough facility. And it's one of the few tournaments I've ever been to where you don't have to go through the sponsorship village to get to your seat. So every place else, they're going to corral you into getting their sponsors' value. And just because of the configuration of the facility, that makes it difficult. And it's something simple. How many times we laugh that believe it or not, guys, there is a way to position the court to minimize the sun. And when the developers he's worrying about giving up the land that he's not going to make money off of a house, or even just to start the process with you guys and say, hey, I don't have this knowledge. I'm sure you'd help, because like you said, 10 years down the line, when they hit that point, when they do realize, okay, I need help, these guys helped me out in the past. It would be so much easier. I'll use the infamous, and I'd love, and I wish I could remember Sandy's last name, when PBI took over the Olympic facility. Everybody was gung ho, who was going to get it? They give it to PBI. And through nothing they did, because again, Sandy was the greatest guy I've ever met. I love Sandy. I'd go over there, but it was just a horrible location. That was on the Olympic committee for creating that mess. It had nothing to do with PBI. They inherited the mess. And now it's a ghost town. And it's a ghost town. Unfortunately, they can't even implode because it's too expensive to implode it. That's the ridiculousness of the industry, and it through no fault, of the management company. So it's tough. I mean, like you said, here in Atlanta, you got 3 completely different hats you're wearing. It's an interesting, circumstance for on top of the internal stuff. It's just wild.
But the interesting is the fun part to it, because
yeah.
you always stay in some real life conversation of what's different. You can't get complacent,
right,
because you've also got to. And the funny thing as well is they can lend each other to blend and mix as well, because people can even be at Standard Club, which is a beautiful facility, and take a little staycation over at Chateau Elan, or same thing, be it Rome or be it Chateau Elan and head down to Rome for a tournament as well. So it's nice that there's commonality. They don't friction a lot. You can actually blend them in. So having diverse products actually has been, I think, part of our success, and then probably in many ways economically helped us survive some tough times in the early years, because as one model is doing well with resort, and if they're not doing so well at the club level, or vice versa.
So just had a question, because the one that always intrigues me, because is the idea of Chateau Elan, just because it's so beautiful. And I don't know how familiar. Is the majority of your business from this, like you said, the staycations, people locally within what you'd call Metro Atlanta, just coming in and really getting this oasis in the middle of the city?
Sure. Different times of the year with just the Atlanta weather patterns and things like that. But a lot of the business there is from staycation from the Atlanta area, but also we have a travel department as well that books camps. We have 2 wonderful ladies, Katie and Megan, that's all they do all day, every day. They book custom camps and signature camps at all of our properties. So we drive a lot of business, and tennis and wine weekends, pickleball and wine weekends, tennis weekends. So that is a lot of it. And then we're going through a resurface project there right now. So hopefully look into it. I think it's right, that area, to get more people into tennis, like tennis 101, pickleball 101. I mean, get people engaged, not necessarily fight for the established market and have people come out and put inconvenience on them. Just take the people that are right there and get new players.
Right. And that's the exciting part. I think that's where pickleball really can help the tennis. Get that new player. And again, you've said it, in Atlanta, they're synonymous, wine and tennis, pickleball. And, you know, you got the wineries, we got half the battle. I mean, a lot of, they get tempted by the beach, but once they're at the beach, they go back to the wine. So now you can be local and get the wine. So why don't we just go right there?
Well, and from your, Scott, from your vantage point, you get to see all of those different aspects. You know, Bobby and I in an email earlier, you know, I said, you're not really a guy in the trenches, meaning on court every day. Bobby and I were both Bobby, you're on court this morning already before we talk. And it's different from that administrative management role that says, I'm guessing we can all remember the time when there was 40 hours a week on court. I think, Bobby, you're still practically doing that. But at some point you look at it and you say, okay, I'm now looking at it from a president of a management company point of view, being able to see places like Rome, places like Chateau Elan and Standard Club, and the Ritz and the fancy places and the resorts. Where is all, do you have a magic 8-ball? Do you have the ability to see from a vantage point? You got a little drone's eye view. I think instead of bird's eye view, we now say drone's eye view, right? To be able to see, okay, here Bobby sees, hey, you know what? Here's the culture in my area, and this is our anecdotal evidence, and I've got my anecdotal evidence here. What do you have from that view that says, okay, I've got all the numbers, guys. Where's everything headed?
I get everyone chipped in their shoulder when they come on board. That's right.
Well done.
I think my history's always been in tennis. I mean, I taught my first lesson when I was 15 years old. I still remember the lesson. I mean, it was terrible because at the end of the lesson, I didn't know whether the kid was right-handed or left-handed. So I'm glad I got past the first one and stuck in there. But yeah, I came from playing competitively, teaching, stringing rackets on, you know, working in the pro shop on Sundays. So all of my roots have always, and my DNA has always been in tennis operations and running tennis clubs, and taught all the way through, then came over the States, traveled a bit, and then taught for many years. And as I initially came into the company, I was a director, and then I just always had a fascination and a mindset. I wanted to learn more and wanted to grow more. And then just as our company started to grow, it sort of worked in, those paths were great. And I think we have a lot of great conversation. We don't steer our vision from what we know. We steer it from how we engage with all of our clubs and our communities, and how we talk to people within our network and also with outside of our network. So you listen to a lot of the feedback, and I think there's always going to be two-way conversation, because your team can bring you a certain amount of information of what's happening. You can bring them a certain amount of industry and knowledge and data information as well. And it's finding that blend. Every club has a director of tennis, but also every club has a senior director that oversees that club. In some instances, they are a director of tennis of theirs as well, and they tie into it as into a few other clubs. So I think we've just got a very collaborative approach at it. We share within celebration where the successes are, but we also share in celebration where the challenges are, because I'm all about creating a vulnerability that it's okay not to have the answers. But if you can talk with your other clubs about where you're having some challenges, you can tend to navigate it through, and then they feel more supported. So I think that's my job, is not, you know, trust the people that are around me, continue to make sure that they understand the decisions and the communication their team are making, so I can still stay at the drone, as you say, but sort of zoom in to zoom out on a lot of different pieces, and not try to get my fingers in too many of the operations at a granular level, just sort of help steer the conversation at a higher level and make sure the teams have got, and I think the big thing there is the teams have got what they need to feel supported and what they need to succeed. It's, you can't send them to build a house if you've only given them a screwdriver and a hammer. So I think a lot of tennis and rackets facilities don't have what they need to succeed. And I think a lot of the time that's also in technology. This is an industry that's been too driven from feeling for too long. It's not been data-driven decisions and data-driven metrics that can sort of show where there's opportunity to grow and succeed as well.
But that's what I want to know. I want to know what data you have. Because of all that information.
Yeah.
You're a guy that has so much data that you should be able to go, okay, I'm starting to see that pickleball is going to take over the world, or whatever's coming next. I want to know what you have.
So part of that comes in like POS and schedulers. We work with a great organization called Play by Point. So we can accumulate a lot of that data as well so that we can share and look at it. A lot of it, we're very good with keeping historic numbers, whether it's in participation and metrics. Also, it's industry trends. I talk to a lot of people in the industry all the time. I'm talking to a lot of our clubs, and I think you've got to be curious all the time, and you've got to trust your gut. And I think, as a business as well, we try to make good, logical decisions, but when we need to move, we move fast. But then the big piece that I think my role is through the data that we have is how can we build what our clubs are going to need in 6 months from now? So we're embarking on a big education project and a big operation project so that by the end of the year, all of our clubs will have universal systems throughout both CDT and PBI. So they've got more tools at their disposal and more data at their disposal so that they can be more armed to then forge forward. So I think the data that I look for is what I can build to give them so they're more equipped.
Like that. Very, very political answer. Sean, I'm not telling you anything. I'm just really good at it.
Well, I'm learning a lot too, Sean. I'll be honest. I'm laughing because he said some great things with unbelievable humility that I'm like, well, you're essentially saying you're better. And if you're really, which is good, hey, I'm all for it. That's why you're hiring me, is that of my knowledge. But Scott, you articulate it very well. You make the person feel like, whether it be the business side or the operations, the employee side, oh, you're a part of this. I know more than you, but you're definitely a part. And I have the proof because I have the numbers, which is culture, which is great. That's why they're calling you. And that's the part again. And I, as we try to do in the city of Atlanta, just trying to get the pros to understand what you're saying. I mean, again, we're not trying to fill this role, but there are a lot of facilities that need a half a pro. So or a third of a pro. So if you find two other facilities, like yourself, that you can get a good person and get them the hours you need and build their career, it helps everybody. And, and it's tough to get people because we become too myopic about what we're doing. As you said, strengths and weaknesses. I'd love to, I laugh because at the club that now has tennis courts, I was dismissed at, the question was, do you want more? Well, who's not going to answer? Do you want more? You can always have more. What it gets down to is resources. How are you going to apply the resources? And are you going to give it time just to bear the fruit? I mean, we went through more general managers because we were going to try to build a restaurant and they would go in and try to do it for 2 months. And well, that didn't work. You gave it 2 months. We didn't really give it a chance to succeed. But again, I think the great part is when somebody goes to Scott, they're making an investment. They're saying, we're going after the top of the rung because we want the expertise, which you should succeed because you are going to the source who has all the information. What I'm dying to get him to admit to is, what does that resurfacing at Chateau Elan really mean? That's what I know he's not talking about redoing the courts. So I'm like, okay, what does he really mean there? Are we getting indoor courts, Scott? That's what I want to know.
Sure. No indoor courts there. I wish we had them in the winter time, but
Yes.
no, they're going through a resurface. They're redoing all the pickleball and the tennis court. So
Gotcha.
hopefully they're investing some good dollars there. The property's amazing to work with, and so I think that's going to be for a better experience. One thing I do probably want to circle back to maybe give a little more to you, Sean, there is I think when you look at data as well, and I was talking to a director this morning about it, I think there's been 3 directors over the course of time. There's the numbers director, there's the feeling director, and then there's the director we want, which is the numbers and the feeling director. Because too many directors go, it feels busy, it feels good, it feels whatever. Then there's a guy that looks at the numbers all the time. You need to be a blend. I think it's part of the education that we really focus on with directors is them understanding the data that they can pull, them getting curious with it, and us building their literacy with financials and data so they can actually make something of it, not look at it and it looks like a bunch of numbers. What does it spell out? And helping them with how they chart their course so they don't pick a number that they want to get to, understanding how to chart the participation and driving the business to get to that. And I think sharing that information of not just looking at data, but how you sort of decipher it and see that it plays a very big role. And every director and senior director look at those numbers on a weekly basis. So we don't get too far away from it. We stay very close to it. Then I meet with every senior director on a weekly basis. So we can stay very granular with them without getting too into the weeds.
Well, and that's really great advice, because I think that's the thing. Every coach, whether you're a director or not, you spent a lot of independents here in Atlanta that we talk to, and we say, guys, what are your numbers? I make about, or I'm maybe this, maybe more feelings guys, because I've met a few tennis pros that can't even do math. So we want to be able to make sure that just look at it, and all of a sudden you'll have it in your head. Somebody asked me a number the other day, and I said, I can give you to the penny what we've made year to date in about 30 seconds. Hang on. Like that is really good information. Whether you're a feeling, like I'm a feeling guy, feels busy, feels doesn't, but the data really proves that maybe I'm not feeling this right. And maybe I need to change something here or there. And that makes a big difference. If we have all that data and we have all those abilities to say, hey, I'm gonna check it every week, I'm gonna pay attention. That leads me into my last question, and I'm going to segue, but then I'm going to pause and say, Bobby, you got anything else for Scott before I hit him with?
I know we're running out of time. We'll see you next week, Scott.
Sounds good.
Speaking of weekly, we're going to talk numbers with you. But so Scott, we have my favorite question for sure, but it's our king of tennis question, and I think you're uniquely qualified for this, because you get. In your drone's eye point of view, you get a lot of the data. You see where racket sports might be going and able to predict it. But you also are a tennis guy. You're an inherent tennis. You said it's in your DNA. So if you were king of tennis, is there anything, whether it's professional, clubs, in your business, outside of it, social, any concept of tennis, if you were king of tennis for however long it took, is there anything you would do or change?
Absolutely. The few things I would change. One thing that I would change is that, and I've shared this with my very good friends at the USTA, that they build the biggest, most powerful, robust POS scheduler system possible and improve the technology and give it to every facility across the country for free. And that would be the best investment they could make in tennis right there. And they would get all the data and they'd mine all the data, but then you would give everyone the technology, because tennis has been far too behind in technology. I will be self-admitted, where we are here, I sit at the Ritz, up until COVID, it's our largest operation that does millions of dollars in programming, and we ran it off a Cameo beauty book and a pencil up until a handful of years ago. So I put myself in the ring on that one as well. I think that's technology. I would mandate that every tennis facility around the country has Tennis 101 and a social component that went to it, because I think too many of us go out there and teach the people we're comfortable with and they're established. So it'd be a mandate that everyone has Tennis 101 for adults and a social component. Also, it'd be a mandate that we have education programs in schools for coaches, whether it's for tennis or other sports, so that more coaching positions are seen as very important positions in the American culture. Because if you want to be a tennis coach in Australia or England or France, it's held in very high regard. I don't think a lot of people enter the profession here because they don't see it in the same high regard. I see it as one of the most skilled professions out there because all the things that you do. So that would be something I would lift that elevation. I think that does come through education, certification, but also the other thing I would put in there as well is I would put you've got to play nice in the sandbox together. Anyone who plays pickleball has to take a tennis 101, and anyone who plays tennis has to take a pickleball 101, because I think we're going to need each other to continue to grow and forge racket sports forward. I think there's a lot of stickiness that can come for tennis from pickleball. My wife's a great example. She'll perpetually be in tennis 101 for many years, but she's playing a little pickleball, but it's getting her excited to come into tennis. And I think every club needs to have that mix, because that's going to help them get more and increased budgets for their rackets departments. I think that's going to be crucial for us all. So those would be some of my immediate actions in my reign of king, however long that may last.
Well, I love the subtlety, and I think it's an awesome subtlety that screamed from the mouth. The difference, and especially here in Atlanta, history has said it, the difference between hiring the person because they're a good player as opposed to hiring the person because you're a coach in a profession. And again, and it's when we entered, Sean and I literally met by getting certified 20 some odd years ago together at the same time. It was, you weren't supposed to even think about getting certified until you had been in the profession for 5 years and decided this was a career path. Now, because of the need to get pros, we've moved away from that. And there's a big difference. There's a difference between the player. Look at professional sport. Bill Belichick played lacrosse, for Pete's sakes, and he's going to go down potentially as the greatest football coach that ever lived. There's a difference between coaching and playing. There's a difference. How many times do we hire a good coach to be a director? There's a huge difference between a coach and a director and the skills that are necessary. And again, the beauty of what you guys do is you got all the hats and you have the resources to put the person involved and engaged with the person is going to most benefit everybody's experience. And, I think, like you said, I wish industry wide that whole mentality was shared better.
Absolutely.
I think Bobby's your new sales guy in Atlanta. Is what it sounds like.
Right. I'm in. It's hey, Scott, power to you, because you put on a great presentation, and it gives people, there's a sense of knowledge, and hey, I know what I'm talking about. And you get a lot of tennis instructors here in Atlanta. The biggest thing we always tell people is get there on time. And that's. If you're starting late, you're starting with a bad impression. So, first impressions are huge. You got to look the part. You don't have to be a Wimbledon champion, but you got to look the part. And, you do a great presentation. And those are, as we like to see you getting more involved on the bigger scale to help the entire industry. I know you have no burden, but, it's impressive and good show for Cliff Drysdale and Peter Burwash to have you. And hopefully it'll permeate continuously into the industry.
I appreciate that. I mean, we're big believers of all ships raised with the tide, so there's enough for all of us around. And I think if we can all share more and sort of swing for the fences, but also have good decisions with it and sort of share thoughts with each other, we should celebrate the success of everyone, because that's how we're going to celebrate the success of racket sports and create more progression for everyone out there. And just yeah.
And it's fun. Like you said, I mean, that's why I always laugh. That's why I love Chateau. It's social. Tennis is the commonality. And this is what we're trying to do. We start with tennis, but where's the commonality take us? As adults, it's harder to find like-minded individuals. We're not all in school together. So tennis is the great opportunity here in Atlanta, but it's not, we should take it further. There's a lot of other things that we do in our lives that tennis could be a great stepping off point from. And again, love what you're doing. We'd love, I don't know who we need to talk to about doing something directly with Chateau Elan, but I would love to make something available to my members at my club as
Yep.
well as other members. It's not a threat to me. I
Nope.
want you to go away to someplace else because your guys will introduce a slice back in, which I won't do. But if they get introduced to it and come back to me and say, hey, the guy showed me, I want to learn it. Well, then you just made my job easier. So I'm all for it. I love the idea. So yeah, let's see what we can do together and throw some fish out there for the Atlanta market.
Love to
Bait.
work with everyone
That's
on that.
bait.
That would be great.
Wait, I was gonna say, now we get the Atlanta market.
Obviously, I'm not a fisherman, so just
We
get
gotta
rid of
call Danny
that.
Donut. We gotta get Buckhead Life Group. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, come on.
I appreciate your time. This has been fantastic. We're only half kidding about talking to you every week, but we will definitely be in touch. I really appreciate everything you've done.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on, and love to be back.